Hey everyone, it's demo time, and today's subject is the Man of Steel with a twist. I'm going to take the traditional Superman and eventually turn him into DC's new version, the Chinese Superman, Kenan Kong. And what you see here is I've already done a sketch beforehand, and I'm just cleaning up a little bit while trying to maintain some of what was fluid and fun about the sketch. And as I said in the previous demo, I'm being a lot more aware of that and just a return to the simple joys of sketching. And so even in this case, though I am cleaning them up, tightening up the line and the paints, I'm trying to be very aware of that mentality of keeping that loose, fluid sketch feel. And so the nice thing about Superman, at least, is since his outfit is so form-fitting, other than the cape, it's pretty simple in terms of putting his costume together. In general, though, that's the way I work, even with characters that are more heavily armored or have a lot of drapery. For me, anyway, I need to draw the body underneath it so I can see how those things fall on it. So that's what you see me here now, erasing some of the lines afterwards. Now putting in the shield. I've always enjoyed drawing Superman's logo. I don't know what it is, something satisfying about it. I think it's an equal degree of, there's a bit of a challenge to it, but it's not so challenging that it's impossible, if that makes any sense. And I think it also has to do with my childhood, since Superman has always been one of my favorite characters. And I have very vivid memory of leaving the parking lot with my parents after watching Superman, Christopher Reeve Superman, and just pretending to fly in the parking lot on the way back to the car. That image is very clear in my head, and I know many of you, at least of my generation, certainly have similar memories. So what I'm going to do here is I'm retaining as much of the original sketch as possible. And I'm using it at a lower opacity setting here as a base layer for my paints. And so what you see me doing now is just cleaning it up a little bit, getting rid of some of the excess outside the drawing, and then bringing back that original sketch. And you can see I'm just sort of filling in the gaps based on the new drawing. And then I'll start to kind of increase the shadows and values and highlights by utilizing the previous color sketch underneath it. I apologize if my voice is a little funny. I am coming down with a little cold or something, I think. But nothing to prevent me from doing one of these demos, or at least talking over one. And so here you see me just slowly tightening up those paints, fixing certain areas very quickly before I start to bring out some of the values and darkening the shadows and bringing up some of the highlights. Now, as far as the costume goes, this is very loosely based, I think, on the latest version of the comic book Superman before his return to the original red shorts. And so that's what I decided to go with here. So what's going on here is I brought back, after kind of touching it up, I've brought back that same layer of paints and darkened it and utilized some of the contrast there. And this allows me now to start touching up a bit some of the highlights as well as the shadows. And again, just really enjoying this process, painting it through. Typically, as I've mentioned, it takes me anywhere between 1 to 2 hours to do these characters. Each one, in this case, each one took about an hour. So this version of Superman took about an hour, and then the Kenan Kong Chinese version took almost an hour, even though I was building on top of this one. So here you see me, as I've mentioned with the Wolverine demo, where towards the bottom I desaturate it a little bit, and I pump up the contrast slightly more towards the head, and that leads the eye up, especially the head and the face are more the focus. So it looks like Superman's pretty much done here, and then I'm going to add a little bit of background. So I'm just adding little details such as the striping on his boots and the belt. So actually I think this is a combination of the live action Superman and the comic book one, something like that. So here I'm drawing the Superman shield as a base, almost like as a toy. They come with those little base shields, that kind of idea. And so here I'm just doing that. And again, it's satisfying drawing his shield. It's just, I don't know why, it's just an S and a diamond, but I think because he's so iconic and everyone knows that symbol, and it generates a lot of different kind of feelings and emotions when we see that. So here I'm just now painting up the base for that. And as I mentioned, fan art is one of those things that I think it's something that's easy to appreciate, obviously, because it's taking on iconic IPs. And, well, I mean, the name of itself, fan art, it's something that you're a fan of. But as I've mentioned, for me personally, I tend to prefer to draw my own thing and my own designs. As much as I do enjoy fan art, I just make sure that I do it when I'm really in the mood for it. So these demos lately, it looks like that's all I've been concentrating on. But if you look at my site, clearly they've been interspersed between my own drawing. Especially I've been into cars these days, and I'll be posting some of those demos in the future. But I just decided, since just to keep this consistent theme of going from the Hulk to Wolverine and now to Superman, who knows, probably the next one I may start showing some of the cars that I've been working on. So quickly doing a drop shadow here just by duplicating the whole character and blackening him out and using a quick distort to get that angle of the shadow. It's a nice, quick, and easy way to get that across. And a little bit of a contrast in the background so he pops out more. So now, in this case, I'm moving on to turning him into Kenan Kong. Now, I have mixed feelings about how DC and Marvel sort of reboots characters, or their quest to make things more racially diverse or ethnically diverse, and I'm all for it. But the reason I have mixed feelings is it sometimes feels a little bit pale just to take a current character and just make an ethnic version of him. And the other reason that I feel have mixed feelings about it is I like the intention, but I'd rather they just create something brand new. Now, it makes sense because on the one hand, it takes time to build up the popularity of a character, and so if you're basing on one that's already known, that's an easy way to generate interest. But sometimes these origin stories I find are kind of, I hate to say it, but a little, they seem a little cheesy or an afterthought. Like, for example, the character Cindy Moon, who is a Chinese-American female version of Spider-Man, and essentially she got bit by the same spider as Peter Parker. And that sounds like to me something that someone thought of in a few minutes. And I'm not trying to insult any of the writers or anything. Yet when I read, it's one of the few characters that I've actually read, and the actual writing for the story behind her is really interesting. So that's why I have mixed feelings, because on the one hand, they're just taking an existing one and then making them changing their ethnicity. And then sometimes the origin stories are kind of silly, or even their costume designs seem like an afterthought. But I find what saves it is the writers, if they get the good writers, and the artists. So I have not read anything at all about the Chinese Superman. And again, I thought the idea was kind of silly. The only other reboot that I've read, and that is ethnically diverse, is Amadeus Cho as Hulk. Now, at least with Amadeus Cho, he's an established character. And so how they, wrote him in terms of gaining the Hulk's powers, that was also pretty dramatic in terms of the crisis that occurred with Banner. And I won't get into that. But at the same time, again, it's taking an existing character and then changing him to Asian. But I have read a lot of his stories, and I do like that they're not trying to be a Banner Hulk, because clearly Amadeus Cho, he's just very spunky, and he enjoys and embraces the power of the Hulk. So when I was doing the Kenan Kong here, I was trying to test myself. How can I make this character that I, at first glance, don't really find appealing, but make him interesting. And for me, it comes down to just how you draw and the style that you put him in. Like, literally, I think if Bruce Timm or Jim Lee took the silliest character ever but did it themselves, it would look cool. Like, look at when Bruce Timm did Conan O'Brien's The Flaming Carrot. Oh, sorry, not Flaming Carrot, that's another character, but The Flaming Sea. Pretty hilarious design, but Bruce Timm somehow kind of made him sort of cool yet hilarious. But I did a little bit of research, and at least with Kenan, they recently announced a redesign because they're launching a Justice League of China, and they changed the shield into this sort of yin and yang S, which I thought was kind of clever. Again, it might be a little bit stereotypical, perhaps, but I did like the idea. Earlier, you saw me change Kenan's face. And that also is one of those things where can be tricky, because when you're doing something like ethnicity in a cartoon especially, we tend to go with certain archetypes and conventions, such as Asians having angled eyes. Now, do all Asians have angled eyes in that direction? No. And do they all have small eyes? No. There's plenty of Asians that have very large eyes and angle the other way. And conversely, you have non-Asians that have eyes that slant that way. But the trick is to do it in such a way that people recognize it subconsciously, but not to the point that it feels maybe offensive. And I think what helps is the fact that I'm Asian. I can get away with making the eyes even more angled. And that may even seem to defeat the purpose of stereotype, but as you can tell, I like very exaggerated, stylized work. That includes exaggerating the face and the features. So I tend to make my Asian characters have that slightly more exaggerated angle in their eyes. The other thing I did was kind of narrow the chin a bit, partly because Kenan Kong seems to me, when I look at examples of him, he's younger and a bit thinner build. But I like keeping this stockiness, but to retain some of that youth, I did narrow his chin. And again, I think it's partly certain conventions across facial and physique features characterized by certain race or culture. And it's just one of those things. I think if it's done tastefully, we don't notice it. But if you analyze it, they tend to do the same conventions over and over. Now, lastly, I'm turning the shield into the yin and yang version. Again, just utilizing the base S that was already there, and working around it, sampling the tones around it, and keeping it quick and easy. And yeah, I do find it was a clever and appealing looking logo. Certainly better than that blocky hexagonal S that they were trying to do in his earlier version. Now, last thing here is just to quickly add some color. And what you're going to notice towards the end here, you'll see me transition between the two different Superman designs. Starting off with the original loose sketch and transferring into the cleaned up version of Clark Kent as Superman, and then into this version of Kenan Kong as the Chinese Superman, or the new Superman. Now, I would love to see certain characters that have already been established, like Shang-Chi. I think what they did with Black Panther, they could do that with Shang-Chi. And even though he was born out of the 70s, and it was certainly very obviously based off of the popularity of Bruce Lee, especially after he passed away, and following what could potentially be a stereotype of, well, here you have an Asian character that's all about kung fu. But again, I think it all comes down to the writing. And if you do a good job with that, then it can quash any kind of fear of stereotypes or perpetuating certain stereotypes. So that's what I'd like to see Marvel and DC do, is take some of these existing characters that have been established or create brand new ones. But this was my attempt to try and take one of these versions of Superman that they did and make it appealing, at least for myself. And that was part of the challenge. And I did enjoy drawing him. Now, will I draw him again? Probably not, but there you go. So there's the original sketch. And then you see it transition to the cleanup version. But again, I tried to keep it loose. And then finally transitioning into Kenan Kong. So I hope you liked that demo. Until next time, see ya.